born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were from Guayaquil. It wasn't the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst neighborhood. There was, gang activity for sure. There was, drugs. When you grow up poor, as you're growing up, you don't know you're poor. I started hanging out with the wrong people, like gang members, and I got back and my mother saw it, and then she was blaming the music.
What do you think is the problem with the Latin industry?
And it's not just the Latin industry. I would say
Your daughter just gets older and she starts blasting some of the craziest music.
Yeah.
When would you say it's appropriate for her to listen to that type of style?
Listen, I was listening to Cypress Hill, How Could I Just Kill a Man? Was that appropriate? Probably not, but I probably got away with it.
Bueno, Jesus, first of all, thank you for joining us here, aquí Café con Adrian. I know you were born and raised in New York City. Somos paisanos porque yo sé que también eres de Ecuador. You're Senior Director and también Industry Relations and Global Latin at Tidal. You're Webby nominated, content creator, worked on projects, People, Vibe, Apple Music, etcétera, etcétera. O sea, I know the list goes on and on. Y gracias por estar aquí, bro.
Gracias, un placer. Thank you.
First, what was growing up for you, growing up in New York City con parents que son de Ecuador inmigrantes?
So I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and my parents are from Guayaquil. They immigrated in the late 60s to Brooklyn. At that time, there was not a lot of South Americans or Ecuadorians in Brooklyn or New York City, for that matter, I think. So in the neighborhood where they first came to was Sunset Park, it was largely Irish and Italian. And then as they were coming in, became a lot of mainly Puerto Rican neighborhood. So I ended up, and then eventually as I was growing up, it became Puerto Rican and Dominican. So again, we were one of the few South American families in the neighborhood. And yeah, no, I mean, I think it was really interesting, right? It was great because I was exposed to other Latinos that are, Caribbean Latinos. And they were exposed to us, they didn't, at that point, there was no internet in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
So we all had to live vicariously through each other, not through the web. But that was great because they exposed me to all types of different cultures within our, the Latino community. So I grew up, around salsa, and I call beans habichuelas. We don't call not
not the frijoles.
Not frijoles. I say habichuelas. Grew up with salsa, but also hip hop, cumbia, boleros, of course, la cortavenas from the Julio Ramillo época. And yeah, no, it was great. I think it definitely, and also I always describe, at least Sunset Park in Brooklyn, it wasn't the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst neighborhood.
You were right in between.
Yeah, it was in the middle, right? I knew there was, gang activity for sure. There was, drugs, but we still had fun. When you grow up poor, as you're growing up, you don't know you're poor. So until somebody tells you, "Hey, you're poor,"
and then you're like, "Hold on, wait, am I poor right now?" Yeah.
I was saying, yeah, you don't know you're poor until someone tells you you're poor, or when you go. So I had the opportunity so I went to Catholic school my whole life, from kindergarten through high school. But the elementary school that I went through in high school, and the Catholic school I went was that the elementary Catholic school that I went to as a kid, it was in Sunset Park, so it was predominantly Latinos students. Mm-hmm. But then when I went to high school, it was in Bay Ridge, and that was largely white. And it was Italian and Irish. It was all boys high school. And that's when I was I think that's when I saw the difference. Economically and culturally, I'm like, oh wow, I'm different.
Yeah, there's a divider here. Let me ask you this. At that point, were you closer to a particular group of, let's say, people, or were you, oh, let me hang out more with the Latinos, or oh no, let me hang out more with the Irish people? Where were you back then?
Growing up, it was Latinos because that's what I was around. Mm-hmm. As a kid, and then it wasn't until high school where my group of friends would lean more white because again, that's what I was around. So like
Right.
and by the time you get to college, then that's when everything opens up. But I feel like in high school, because and that exposed me to another cultures, right? Irish and Italian. There were some Middle Eastern kids in high school too. So yeah, so I was leaning, I still had obviously the Latino-ness of and South Americanness in my home, but then outside of it was everything else.
Everything. Yeah, I feel like that's the best thing about New York, that you get to experience different cultures, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It doesn't, I think, I always say that, the subway system and the train and the buses, the MTA basically in New York City, it connects all of us because we all have to take the train or the bus to get
Mm,
somewhere. Even if we live in different neighborhoods, we all have to get on that train to go where we have to go, where we live or we work. That's the difference between like say Miami or LA,
mm.
that everyone drives everywhere.
Yeah.
Here, like people, not everyone drives. Like if you live in the city, definitely probably don't drive. But we're forced to be next to an Asian person, a Hasidic Jewish person, a black person, like Latino, white, doesn't matter. So we're all on the same boat.
The melting pot, like how they be saying over there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a melting pot.
Were you, when you were younger, this might be a little personal, but were you closer to your mom or your dad growing up?
I would definitely say my mom.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been very vocal about that for sure. Like, I think it's I wouldn't be I wouldn't be the minority in saying that in general with like kids of immigrants because I feel like
Yeah.
your mom is, if traditionally, it's not always like this, but I would say a lot, especially back in the day, like the father was working and the mom was stay at home working, being a stay at home mom. Um, so yeah, I would definitely say I was closer to my mom.
So would you say that she kind of gave you um that guidance where like you needed to do like for where you're at right now, like like as a person, would you say your mom was more like of the caregiver and your dad was he more strict? Like,
No, I mean they were both strict, and they both. I would definitely credit both of them to where I am now. Um, I think they also like they struck the fear of God in you for like myself and my older sisters that you have to go to college, you have to get your degree, you have to do something in life. They all they wanted us to be better than them. My father he had to drop out and from elementary school to help support his family in Ecuador,
mm.
and then my mom got married to my father at 15. She was
Oh
15 and he was
wow.
20. Yeah, so like they both didn't finish their career as a student, even high school. So like I think they wanted more for us, and I think mission accomplished because all three of us graduated from college with degrees. So
I'm sure that must be crazy for them too, to like, okay, like my children, they were able to finish like, because I mean, they gave up what they had to at that point to raise you guys.
yeah, yeah,
So,
of
so
course.
then during when was it during high school? Was it before high school or in college that you were like, let me dive into the whole world of music, or was there someone that influenced you to get into it?
I think for me it was around probably like like when you start developing your own musical taste, which is around like 11, 12. Because before that I liked anything my older sisters liked.
You're like,
So
yeah.
yeah, whether it was Madonna or George or Prince or George, not to say those artists are amazing, but I think around that age 11, 12 is when like hip hop started becoming was introduced to me by like an older friend. He had mixtapes and he brought them to me and I started listening to them, and then I started really getting into it, and then I started reading the magazines that were associated with it. So like The Source and
Mm,
Vibe magazine, even Slam, which is a basketball magazine, but it was very influenced by hip hop. So those magazines I started reading, and then I started like really getting into the culture of hip hop and like going back, listening to the music that was before my time, like in like Slick Rick or on DMC stuff like that. Um, but I came of age, I guess you would say, like preteen and teenager in like one of the golden eras of hip hop, which is like Tribe Called Quest and Wu
yeah.
Tang, Nas, Biggie, Jay Z, Mobb Deep, Cypress Hill, all these Fat Joe, all these artists. were coming out around the same time, and I was a kid. I was a teenager kid, like going into this, and then I really, just became immersed in it. And then I think it was like it was in high school that sort of like high school that a teacher told me that I should look, like an English teacher told me, Mr. McCartney, he told me I should look into journalism as a way to, like, for a career. I didn't think about journalism, but I was like, okay. But then I was, at the same time, I was reading these magazines, like these hip hop magazines.
Because you just
Where
loved it. You just like loved what
I
was
loved
going
it.
on, the culture.
I loved
Yeah.
it. And also, like, around, it was what I was experiencing outside of my house. And it's in, Brooklyn, like people associated Brooklyn with hip hop, even though I was born in the Bronx. Like, Brooklyn is one of those boroughs that people automatically, it doesn't matter where you are in the world,
Yeah.
you say you're from Brooklyn, you're like, oh, you think about Jay-Z, you think about Biggie,
The
you
history
think
of hip hop in a way. Yeah.
yeah. So being in that, I'm, being born and raised in that, which I'm super proud of being from Brooklyn. Like it was no way around it. And then I see, those magazines, beyond letting me know that more about these artists, because again, there's no social media, so these magazines were the only way. There was no internet, so it was the only way to find out more about Redman or whoever, right? Big Pun.
Right.
So, and then I started, as I got, when that teacher told me about journalism, I started looking at the bylines of the articles, which I didn't look before. And then when I started seeing that some of these bylines had Spanish surnames, I was like, oh wow. So like, and like this guy Carlito Rodriguez, who's editor in chief of the Source, now he's like a TV writer, film writer. Riggs Morales, who was the editor of the Source too. He was editor of the Source, responsible for Unsigned Hype. Now he's one of the head people at Def Jam. Mimi Valdez, who was the editor in chief of Vibe, she now works with Pharrell. Like, and all these people I was reading as a kid, and they were Latinas, and I eventually met them, like, as I got older. Crazy, right? It's a full circle moment. But anyway, seeing those names, seeing their words, made me believe that I could do this. I could do the same thing. So, and then I think by the time reggaeton came along, so reggaeton for me came along like in the early 2000s, because like the whole 90s I was super immersed into hip hop, American hip hop, and then reggaeton came along like late 90s, at least for me. I know it started earlier, but for me, I was exposed to it like around late 90s, early 2000s, with like my Puerto Rican friends. And I was still in college, and I just saw it as another form of hip hop. It was just, hip hop in Spanish.
Yeah, because at
language.
that time, sorry to cut you off, at that time, reggaeton wasn't as accepted as it is right now.
Right. Right. And it was very similar to what hip hop was in beginnings too, right? So it was seen as this music done by vulgar and done by lower class, but really what it really was the music of the disenfranchised people, right? Just the way hip hop was, and created by Black and brown kids, and also influenced by, at the end of the day, Black music.
I want to take a little step back. Whenever you talk about hip hop, were you taking it back home, and were your parents okay with that? Or did they
No.
not care? No, okay.
they were not okay with, well, especially my mom. My father was he didn't really.
Yeah.
I I remember I was always a good student throughout my career, educational career, and what was it? I think seventh grade going into eighth grade. I started hanging out with the wrong people, like gang members. And even though my grades were still good, there was like some, the comments from the teachers was like, he's not paying attention, or he's handing like, but so my mother was like, and I remember hiding it was the last report card. It was the last report card. And I hid it. I was like, I don't need to get a sign. So it's the last report card of the year. And I put it on my bed. I went to the park, stayed out probably way too late for a 11, 12-year-old. And I got back, and my mother saw it, and then she was like, "What's wrong with you?" Blah blah. And she went crazy. Always remember she took a hammer to one of the cassette singles that I had.
No.
It was a Gangstar single. I think it was Mass Appeal. And she was blaming the music. She's like, "This is because of this, música, de basura." Like she would call it trash. Like,
Música
um,
diabólica.
yeah, right. So she took a hammer to it and blamed the music why I was like doing wrong, and I was doing wrong. I wasn't doing what I was doing before in school. She blamed the music, and I mean, both my parents are passed away at this point, but I remember telling them. I mean, they saw me as they didn't see me now, but they saw me as a journalist, and I'm like how funny it was that she was upset at that, but I made a career out of hip
Yeah.
hop and music and Latin music. So yeah, no, she was not accepting of it.
What do you think about that? Because I know you have a family now.
Yeah.
So, do you think music or the type of music you listen to really impacts who you are as a person, or you think someone can listen to, let's say, some gangster music, but still be not that what they speak of? You know what I mean?
I mean, it's tricky, right? Because I feel like it depends. I was listening to that music, but I was listening to like say, and not all hip hop is aggressive. Like there's some
Yeah.
like hardcore hip hop. I mean, my favorite group of all time is the Tribe Called Quest. They're the least. They're the total opposite of hardcore hip hop. So, um, but but the hardcore hip hop that I was listening to, I can only speak from my angle. I was in that environment. Like whatever those rappers were rapping about, I was there. Like not what they exactly were talking about, similar situations. I look out my window, they were talking about the same things. So I identify with that. I don't know if I grew up if I'm growing up the way my daughter's growing up in the suburbs. Like
I was
how
gonna
can,
ask you that. How does it
how can
compare?
you yeah, how can you identify with that?
Hmm.
But I will say that as a kid, growing up in Brooklyn, being around those artists, I mean being around those the environment, um, and being only in that bubble as a kid, I thought that hip hop was just yes, it was created by black and brown kids in Bronx, and it was just for us.
Mm.
Clearly I was wrong, right? And I think that changed for me once I actually started writing and interning for hip hop publications like websites, and I got into those offices, and I was like, oh my god, like everyone. So there's an Asian guy here, there's a white woman over here, white kids from New Hampshire and black kids from California, and we're all in this office because we love hip hop.
Mm.
So yes, it was created by black and brown kids, and also like I remember going to concerts, reviewing a hip hop concert, and looking in the audience, and it was all white kids
Mm.
because for the most part, black and brown kids in our situation, we don't have money to go to a concert because paying for a ticket is a luxury.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, no, I totally changed it. So I mean, to answer your question, I guess I would say yes and no,
Mhm.
and it really depends on the way you're raising your kid and being able to separate the art from the person and the message, because there's a message in every song, and almost every song, I would say.
Yeah.
Whether it's, hey, I want to go party, hey, like, this is messed up in society, or I'm in love with this person, like there's always messages. And yeah, I think there is influence, but it's the way it's a case by case basis. So
So that let's say, right, your daughter just gets older and she starts blasting some of the craziest
yeah,
music. Maybe not hip hop, but like just a
cool.
combination of different genres. Who knows? When would you say it's appropriate for her to listen to that type of style?
I mean, I don't listen. I was listening to How Could I, Cypress Hill, How Could I Just Kill a Man when I was 10. So was that appropriate? Probably not, but I probably got away with it because my parents didn't speak English. Like it
Right.
was my sisters that ratted on me. Like
Oh, it's not. It was the sisters.
yeah. Um, so I don't. it's tough, right? And even now, like my wife and I, we're super into music, and we play music for her all the time. But like, there's certain things we don't play for her. But we'll play like J Balvin songs and songs by the Beatles and like salsa, and like she's really into Barbie right now, so we'll play the
Right.
Barbie
The Dua Lipa songs.
song. Yeah, the Dua Lipa. Um, but like at a certain point, you gotta accept the fact that they're gonna listen to what they're gonna listen to. They're gonna have friends telling them about this, and
Mm.
um, but I would hope that we're both like whatever that comes. Like, I mean, she's 3 going on 4 now. Like pretty soon, right? Like 6, 5, less than that, probably less than 5 years. She's gonna be listening to some stuff. Um, we're gonna have those conversations. Like the conversations that my parents couldn't have because of
Yeah.
the language barrier. And also like we're different because I'm in this industry, so I can I can tell you, hey, maybe listen to this, maybe I can
Yeah.
direct her in a different direction.
No, 100%. Yeah, exactly. Let's say she comes out with
But
something.
sometimes the kids want what the kids want. Like I mean, as you can see, whatever artists, and you can't what should we call it? You can't censor artists. Like
Yeah,
I
because
just
they'll find a way to listen to it. Just how even you back then, without internet, you still were like, oh, let me listen to this, you know?
yeah, yeah, of course.
So that's crazy. So, okay, I want to take you now to a little bit before the journalism, before you that started for you. Did you ever want to be a rapper or like an artist?
Yeah, no, I tried
Oh,
to
you try.
be a
Okay.
rapper, but no, like not like for real, for real. Like I remember rapping I was like 12 and 11, 12, and I recorded myself on a cassette tape over like some beat, and I don't know if I still have that cassette, but then I remember I took it the next level and rapped did a freestyle at a party
Oh, snap. You
at this girl
perform.
at a girl's birthday party that I liked, and and I I bombed horribly, and
You
I was like,
forgot the lyrics?
I don't even know what happened, but it was not good. There's something it's in my bank of like
Of not to remember.
not to remember, ignore to
So
ignore.
you said, okay, let me do it. Was it an original song or is it like a cover?
Yeah, yeah, no, it was original. It was like
Oh,
some
snap.
like bars. It was like it wasn't even a song. It was like some bars that I had in my head, and it just didn't connect. And I was like, all right, after this, I'm not gonna do this
Wait,
ever
wait.
again.
Did she like it?
I mean, I don't even know if she was paying attention, to be honest with you.
Oh my God. That's so funny. And then from there, then you try, but then you were like, okay, this is not my thing, or let me focus on journalism.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was too young at that point to like even be like, all right, I want to focus on this. I just knew I was not good at that. So I think then I started writing graffiti um, because like that's part of the hip hop culture. So like I think especially if you grew up in New York, like you try at least something. I wanted to be a DJ, but of course
Yeah.
you need money to buy a DJ to buy
Oh
DJ
yeah, the
equipment. The
equipment.
DJ
Yeah.
is really expensive, but so that didn't happen. So the only things I tried were graffiti and um, the MCing. So
Right. So you kind of did the whole like, oh, let me just rap, freestyle, and oh, let me see if I can be an artist. Oh, let me be an artist, but more like painting or just like visual
yeah,
stuff, and then oh,
yeah.
DJ, and then but it was still very creative. You know what I'm saying? And were you thinking that? Were like, oh, like I'm a creative person, or no, I'm a more analytical person. Like, did you know where kind of you fit in, or was that something you had to figure out?
Yeah, no, I think I always knew I was more of a creative person because of like I liked reading all the magazines and listening to music and like write like poems and stuff. So yeah, so I definitely lean in that direction.
Got you. And then whenever you found, I know you were telling me about like, oh, you were reading magazines, and then you were like, oh wait, the people that wrote it or worked on it are so and so. Um, what was your next step? Were you like, oh, I need to finish studying for this, or I need to find this person? Like, what did you think? Like, okay, how can I get to where they're at?
Um, I think that didn't connect until I got to college. So when I got to college, I went to Brooklyn College here in New York, which is part of the CUNY system. It's a city university. Um, so I think, what was it, like 19, 20 years old? I was taking journalism classes, and I started doing internships, like by my own volition, because I mean, even though they obviously tell you to do internships, but I did. So I did 4 internships before I graduated because I knew I needed to. I was going to, I was going to graduate college with a degree, but it was a degree from a city school, which is
Mhm.
great, but it's not Columbia University or Syracuse,
Right.
NYU, any of these, Northwestern,
Yep.
none of these universities that are known for journalism. So I knew I had to, get those. I'm in New York, so I'm like, let me try to get internships here. So I started with, um, and it all trickled. It all like one thing happened after the next. It all like were connected, just the way everything is nowadays in general too. So I had a feature writing class in school, and one of the assignments was like to pick pick a place to write the feature story on. So at that time, again, I was still super into hip hop, and I kept on hearing this studio being dropped, or in the lyrics, or it was recorded in the studio. It's called D&D Studios. So
Mm.
it's a famous hip hop studio in New York. I think now DJ Premier owns it. It's called Headquarters. I don't know if it's still around. I think so, but back then it was called D&D Studios. Everyone recorded there, from Jay-Z to Gangstar, Biggie, Big Pun. All the greats had recorded there. So I looked it up. I was like, all right. I looked it up in the yellow pages.
Oh, snap, the yellow page.
Yellow pages. Yep. And I got the number. I called up. I'm like, hey, my name is Jesus Triviño. I'm calling from Brooklyn College. I'm a journalism student. Um, can I come in and, like, I'm working on this. Like, can I come in and write a story on studio? And the guy who picked up his name was Kenyatta Jackson. And he's like, yeah, sure, come by. I was like, okay. So I came by, and it's just, it was the first time I had been anywhere like that. That was my first, I guess, entrance into the music industry. I
Right.
was like 19, and the guy's like, all right, cool. So I talked to him, then I talked to the owners, Doug and Dave, which is what the D&D stands for. And then as I'm talking there, like all these I see artists come by, like MOP were coming in and out.
Were you
Uh,
nervous when you were there?
I was a little nervous. Yeah, I was a little nervous. And then, so I wrote it. I thanked them, and then I was like, all right, I'll send you a copy, whatever, of when I give it to my professor. So I sent it, I wrote it. Sent it to my professor. I think I got an A or whatever. And then the guy, Kenyatta, was like, oh, you want to come by again? I was like, sure. I'm like, what am I? I'm not doing anything. So I'm like, sure. And then he read it, and he's like, oh, this is cool. He's like, you want to, he's like, do you want to interview some artists while you're here? I'm like, okay. And I'm like, at that point I was writing for the school paper. So the first artist I interviewed was this group called Killer Army, which was like, they were
Mm.
like a group under Wu-Tang.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, so I did that interview. I put it in the newspaper. And then again, I kept on going back. So then this guy Kenyatta was like, eventually he
kept
said,
calling
oh,
you.
yeah. He's like, eventually he's like, do you want, it was around this time, like the January, February, whatever it is. And he's like, or maybe later than that, spring maybe. And he asked me, he's like, are you looking for internships? I'm like, yeah, like, sure. And he's like, well, my friend owns this website called SOHH, which is at that time, it was a big hip hop site. He might be looking for interns. The only thing is they're based in Jersey City. I'm like, okay. So went there, interviewed with them, and got the internship for the summer.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and then got the internship for the summer, and then I started, because they were a website at that point. It was like post the website boom, because there was in the late
Oh, yeah, the
90s, early
2000s.
2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like a big boom where all these websites were getting money, and they were part of it. And then they had left, the big I think it was UBO. They had left to be on their own. So, they had a little staff, but they still needed writers. And again, I
Right.
was an intern. And then they started like, they're like, can you interview do this interview? Can you do an interview with Ghostface Killer? Can you do this interview with Fat Joe? I'm like,
So,
sure.
so those interviews, how are you doing them? Were you asking them questions? Were you meeting with them? How was that?
Yeah, yeah. I was meeting with them, asking, doing my research. They obviously had something to promote, whether it's this album or single.
Right.
And again, this is like early on when websites, artists, they were like, sure, we'll do it, but they
Yeah,
rather
they
have,
didn't like believe in, so like what the internet would be like for.
yeah, they rather had an article in a print magazine.
Mhm.
But I'm like, I'll take it. So I was, and we were putting it up on the site, and then so that led to the next internship led to Vibe magazine,
Oh
and
wow, you
that was
just
like that was like the big leagues, right? Because
yeah.
but again, that led from the owner, this guy Steven Stamio, the owner of the website, and Felicia Palmer, the owners. They knew one of the editors at Vibe, this guy Hyun Kim, who had worked for them a couple years ago,
Mm,
and they were like, "Oh, you should, what do you want to do after this?" Because essentially, like,
almost over type. Yeah.
it's almost over. So, but in the meantime, I had still for many like a couple years around that time, I still was writing for them, and I had like freelance money coming in from them.
Right.
So by the time I connected with Hyun, and then the internship person at Andrew Simon at Vibe, I got the internship there, and then that was really, not and that was like more corporate, right? Because it was a big company, big magazine at the time. They had just won like awards, uh, and I was there for a semester, and then again, started talking to everyone. And before I left, I wrote for them. I started writing for them. And I remember the first article I did for them that I got paid for Vibe was an interview with Willie Colon.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they had a section called a column called Dome Piece, I think, where they had usually an old school artist talk about one of their classic songs and the time, the time, or an album, and what the thinking behind it. So I was at that time I was really getting into Fania. I was really obsessed with it because even though my parents had played Fania salsa
Yeah.
growing up, you don't want to listen to what your parents listen to.
I
But
know
then when
until later on.
yeah, so by the time I got to college, I started listening to all that like Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, and Fania. So I was really into Hector Lavoe, Willie Colon, and I pitched the story to the editor at Vibe while I was an intern. I'm like, oh, this is a good one. Like you should talk to Willie Colon about El Gran Barón,
Oh
like which
snap.
is this classic, song about homophobia and just you know in the way that Latino at that time and still do some Latino parents deal with it, having a gay son or whatever, not accepting it, which was super powerful at that time, and even then to even talk about it, right? So
Yeah.
that was my first interview with that was my first big interview, I would say, that I had with an icon, really.
Oh yeah. And then whenever you're submitting these pitches, was it just one and then or was it just you or different people pitching them at the same time?
Oh yeah, no, everyone pitches like stuff.
Mm.
I was in there, right? I was an intern, so they knew me. They saw I would go in a couple days a week, and when I wasn't doing copies or whatever or research for them, I would be like,
Yeah,
picking their
here, take
brain.
a look at this.
Yeah. So, and then from there, that one led to um, the next internship, which was at people.com. I guess again another website, like,
So
and
you
that one.
early on you got into the website game like without almost even trying just because of thanks to the yellow pages and from there.
Yeah, yeah, and also if you think about it, at that time magazines were really still like
Yeah.
big. Everyone wanted to get into magazines, and I was like, let me get into this. Let me do. I don't know why, but I was like, it's
Yeah.
the opportunity I was given, but I went that route. So, and I remember going to people.com, and they were on a different floor than People, like the magazine.
Hmm.
The magazine floor was super nice. The people.com, they were like in a dungeon.
The last floor below.
Yeah, they were like but I got there, worked for the summer. It was actually the only internship that paid me for the like being there, so that was good.
Yeah, as an
Um,
intern.
yeah, and then did some pieces for them, and then the last internship I did was Rolling Stone,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, so I did, and I didn't learn much at Rolling Stone.
Mm,
Only, and maybe I was spoiled by the hip hop places, because the hip hop publications and websites, it's more hands on, and they'll give you more of an opportunity because they're like, they need the help, or they're just, they're, majority of them are minority editors or owners,
right.
so they will like rather give me a shot. But I did the Rolling Stone thing, and I just, who doesn't want to have Rolling Stone on their resume?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and I did it. And then by the time I got out, I had a job at going back to Vibe in their research department.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Were you
so
still
yes,
in school during this, or had you already finished?
for the internships.
Yeah, for the last
Oh, I
for
was still in
the.
school. Yeah, I
Oh, okay.
was.
So you were in
Yeah,
school and doing the internships.
yeah. No, I was in school doing the internships. I was also like one of the editors for um, one of the editors for the school paper at Brooklyn College, which they paid me like a stipend. I was also working at like a DVD store.
Oh,
Mom and pop.
really? You were just getting your hands on everything then.
Yeah, no, we have to, right? Because like I wasn't making a lot of money, but
Yeah.
and I was still living at home, but I had to, make, if I wanted to go out, have a drink, whatever, or take a girl out, like I'm not gonna
Yeah.
have no money. You have to have money. It's like, so, and I was hustling, like I was like just every day something going on. Like if I wasn't, working on the paper, I was doing interview, and also like again, so it was like around 1920, and I was already interviewing artists. I was interviewing artists, and through those connections, I also started writing for the Source and all these other different places. And yeah,
So you were always just looking for opportunities, and you were like, okay, no, I need to keep going, and you didn't want to stay like in one spot, or like you always wanted to keep going up, right?
yeah, no, of course.
You think you learned that from somewhere and somewhere, or was there somebody like, let's say, in the industry that you were like, oh, I want to hopefully one day be in the same room with them back in the
I mean,
day?
yeah, well, I mean, all those people I mentioned, right? The writers before, like Carlito, Riggs, Mimi, um, all those people, I wanted eventually, you know, be where they were. And when I met them, and even to this day, I always, bow down to them, because I'm like, hey, you guys, you set the blueprint for people like myself. And whether, and all of them, even like myself at this point, we didn't stay in journalism, but journalism was our way in. And so, yeah, so I definitely looked up to them, and other people, not just Latino writers, but like people like Tony Triviño, who was editor in chief of Slam
Mm.
and Double XL, and he's also my current boss, and consider him a mentor. Uh, People like Scoop Jackson, who's a Slam, also like it's like a lot of writers, and people like that.
How would you, what advice would you give someone that's like, okay, in today's day and age, like how would they try to get their start in the industry, let's say with journalism? Like, what would you recommend them?
Um, it's tricky, right? We just saw. I don't know if you saw that Pitchfork is being folded into GQ. So
Hmm.
like it's a tough. It's I mean, in general, everywhere is going through changes, and every industry is going through changes. But media in particular, like just when you thought, like, oh, they're focused on websites and stuff like that and social media. Now there's other changes. Like Pitchfork was one of the last, you know, lone survivors of true music journalism. I mean, obviously you still have Rolling Stone, but there's fewer. Just saying that there's just fewer places
Right.
for you to get your start. So even if you want to be an intern somewhere, like where, uh, I would say, I mean, if I was 20 and right now just starting out, I would look into social media and like start doing your own content. Start doing, whether it's you want to write music reviews or video, do a vlog on whatever music. I mean, it's going well for like a lot of TikTokers, and um, like in the hip hop space. There hasn't been much on the land space that I've seen recently. Um, but yeah, I mean, but there's also things come in ebbs and flows. So like, there's always opportunity for people to create new things.
Right.
But I think there's less opportunity now on say like a proper on like a what people see as uh, a
Can
platform,
DM
like
brand type,
a website.
yeah.
But I think the opportunity on the flip side is that you can create your own things. So
So would you say, I mean, I feel like this might be different for each person, but would you, let's say you, right, starting now,
mhm.
let's say you're 20 right now, would you start your own thing rather than go seek it and try to be on somebody's platform? Or what's your take on that?
I mean, depends on your situation. Like if you were um, come from upper middle class or middle class, like maybe you do take a shot on your own. But if you're in my situation when I was like didn't have anything, like I might just go work for a company. Like it depends on case by case. So I would have done what I did already. Like had gone
Right.
and put yourself out there. Like I think that's the more than
Mhm.
anything is like put yourself out there. And I always tell kids like look at the people, look next to each other, like on the right side and the left side, the people that you're coming up with, those are the people that are gonna, come up with you. And then maybe one day they'll give you a shot or you'll give them a shot or you can collaborate or something. You're always gonna be around with those same people in your class. And I'm not talking about school, I'm talking, talking about the industry, whatever industry
Right.
you're in, like, these are the people you're gonna come up with. So
So I want to ask you this. I know you've interviewed so many people, so many artists, even colleagues at this point, but right now you're also more into the Latin music, started the new year 2024. Where do you see the Latin music heading to this year from what you've gathered?
yeah, I mean I would say there's more collaboration coming up with non-Latin artists, like those artists taking whether it's a Peso Pluma or Karol G or whoever, or some more of the developing artists is more collaboration where they stay true to their form, their artistry, and they'll stay true to their Spanish language. I think the days are gone of artists trying to like sing in English,
Mm.
even if it's a collaboration with an English language artist. So more of that, more exploration, and innovation on the Mexican music side, I think. Um, and I've been saying this for years, is more experimentation with like, non-reggaeton genres. Because I think reggaeton is great. I love reggaeton, but there's a point where like not everyone can do reggaeton. Not everyone should do reggaeton.
Yep.
Let's hear some pop, like pop, some R&B in español. Um, I mean, we were talking about España. We haven't had any really fruitful salsa acts in the last couple of years and decades, probably. So, I mean, Mark
Yeah.
Anthony is the king, but there hasn't really been anyone on his level or close to it. So,
And I think some of that, it's because, like you said, reggaeton is cool and all, and then, like after Despacito, people just like it's always been there, but like now people are like, no, reggaeton, reggaeton. And sometimes I've even heard salsa artists go into the reggaeton instead of staying within their lane and try to keep exploring that because they might feel that, oh no, it's not international enough just yet. What do you think?
um, I mean, and before I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I think the countries that I'm expecting more artists to come from is Venezuela and Ecuador.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the trauma and um, the unrest that's going on in those countries, especially in Ecuador right now, and horrible what's happening, of course. But like what happens on the flip side, at least one of the few positive things that comes out of it is art, and from pain, there's going to be some great art that's going to come out of it. And I think there's a lot of artists in Ecuador right now that are coming out. I always say this kid, Alex Ponce,
Oh,
who's good.
he is killing it with the
He's
whole everything.
and I just became aware of him, I think, over a year ago. Now he's signed to Warner.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's great. Dayanara, who's someone else from
Oh
Ecuador
yeah.
too. She's like, has this different take on it. So there's a lot of people bubbling out of that country, and we haven't had anyone really like,
No,
and
like I
it's
can't eat like I can think of people, but like it always takes me back to like the olden ages, and it's like recent or even in the past decade, I can't think of someone that like, oh, you know what I
no,
mean?
no. So I think that's due for in the next, whether it's next year or next couple of years, those countries are due for something. Just the way Argentina and Chile
Just how, yeah,
have been, yeah, they've been having their moment the last couple of years, because obviously like you have Puerto Rico, DR, Colombia, Mexico, like those are the four.
they're always kind of just there now. Yeah.
Constant, constant. And then now you have Argentina, Chile, and I would say like Venezuela and Ecuador. So
I really see that, especially in Miami, where I've been able to see the some of the like the people moving in here from Venezuela, and like the music and how they're in a way, because of what's going on, coming together as a community and like, oh,
yeah,
let's help each other. You know what I'm saying? And then just like you said, despite everything that's going on in Ecuador, with all the pain, like I know people that one, the country will move forward, but I'm I'm hopeful that a lot of good art will come out of it too, for sure.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
okay, I have a few questions, and with this we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Uh, but I want to get a little controversial with you, man. I just want to ask you something. Hopefully, we'll see. What do you think it's this may sound kind of crazy, not crazy, but what do you think is the problem with the Latin industry?
What do you see the problem as?
No, like, is it like something that you're like, oh, from your perspective, like, oh, I wish we could do more of this. Oh, I don't like that. Sometimes it leads to this. Like, on your take, like, what something that you may not like?
And it's not just the Latin industry. I would say in general, the music industry. There's a lot of like, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't genuine,
Mm.
and but I would say in being able to, been blessed to work in the general market field and in Latin side, I would say the Latin industry is way more accepting of anyone, and I'm sure there's problems everywhere. But I will say that, and I don't know if this is the answer you wanted, but like there's a camaraderie among us, among people that work in this industry, and whether we go to a conference or an award show, there's always this warmth of like, oh, hey, how's it been? How's your family? And a willingness to help out artists, especially talented artists that are talented artists that are pushing the genre forward and the culture forward. Um, and I know I'm speaking it from this side. It might be different if you're an artist or an up and coming artist or maybe a label exact. I can only talk about it from my experience as someone in streaming and also someone who's had a media background. Um, and also for myself, someone, at this point being like an OG, even
Right.
though I'm just in my early 40s, but I've been doing this since, I was 20. Um, I always look back and make sure, as they say, to send the elevator back down. So whether it's talking to up and coming journalists or up and coming people in streaming, like I'm here for it, like because I've been through everything, almost everything, I think. And if my advice or my experiences can help them in any way, then I'm here for it. And I think that's the one thing that was missing from when I was coming up. I didn't get that same uh like the same interaction from older Latinos at that point. And not including like those journalists were great for me, but like in general, like the help I got was from non-Latinos.
Mm. Yeah.
So, and I feel like there was a fear, at that point, and maybe still is for certain people, when they get to a certain level, they were so used to being the only Latina in the space that they were nervous that some new Latino person is coming in and taking their spot. So I
Right.
kind of understand that point a little bit, but at the same time, in order to evolve, in order to grow as a people in any field, you need to help, because like you can't be the only one.
Yeah.
It's just like in any genre, right? Like if a certain genre is going to succeed, it can't be just one person. It has to be at least, I always say, at least 3 to 5 people. Like there'll be like, yes, there'll be like one person at the peak, but then there'll be like 3 or 5, that are right at that, inching at that level. And that's how it succeeds, right? That's how reggaeton has succeeded. That's how, Mexican music is now like succeeding. So like, it's the same way for us as an industry. Like we have to help out each other. And not just like, just fakeness. Like if you ask anybody about me, I would say for the most part, there's gonna be some haters, but for the most part, my word carries long, and I'm a man of my word, and I try to help people out as much as I can within my capabilities. Because you never know, like you never know when I'll be out when I'm gonna need your help too, like for anything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I can always say like, hey, people can always say like, oh, Jesus is a good guy, like he made time for me, or do this and that, or give me an opportunity. So I think that's my answer.
No, I love that. I love that. And a few things. What's something that working at Tidal has taught you?
um hmm. Well, I mean, I never thought I'd be on this side. I thought I was going to be a journalist my entire life. And in here, like, not only have I been able to like, be a curator, but also this, discovering new artists. But at the same time, like I was already doing that as a journalist, but now giving artists a different platform and different opportunities to like help their career out. It's different. Like I learned that I can take my experience as a journalist and apply it to anything really.
Mm,
Like, I can, work here at Tidal. I can and use the way I identified new artists as a journalist. Do that over here on playlisting side, but then also like using the connections that I've accrued throughout my career and making sure I can like connect the dots on the Tidal side with the Latin community and also like the general market community. So I think I've learned that, yeah, that's where I've learned like that I can use every experience, every job, every whatever, like it leads you to this point. And yeah.
no, I love that, man. And lastly, is there anything you would tell your younger self right before you started to get into the industry that maybe like, hey, maybe do this quicker or do this differently? Is there something you would tell your younger self?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I didn't to get into it, like I think it was a great way to get into it, like
No,
through a
you
steam.
killed it. You said right into.
Uh, but I would say maybe have more confidence in yourself. Because I think after a certain point, like in the beginning, like, yeah, you're just starting out, and you don't know what you're doing. You don't know the importance of what you're doing. But like it was after I got like 10 plus years in the game, I would have hoped I would have been more confident. Because I think I came into my own as a person, as a man, and in my career, and between Title and my last job at Latina Magazine. So between those two jobs, it created like, and also like my wife gave me confidence, like this bolster. So just be more confident earlier on. But I think that's it. It's tough, right? Because you're as minorities and people of color, we deal with imposter syndrome. So like when
Mm,
people tell you like, oh, you're dope, you're like, you kind of believe it, but you don't. You're like, hey, should I be here? So I got over that, and now I'm like, yeah, no, I need to be here. I need to be in this room.
right.
I know my worth. Like I've done this, and I'm just beginning. Like this is not over. Like I want to keep on doing more. So yeah, I think that would be the advice. Like be more confident
When did you
earlier.
realize that where you're like, oh no, like I am that person? Or
I
how?
would say I would say the last like handful of years, like the last 5 years or so. It took a while. Like
Yeah.
it took like me doing, panels as an expert, and uh, being interviewed by, journalists instead of being the journalist, being
Mm,
in for stories as an expert, or being profiled in places. And I think all that gave me confidence, and also interacting with the artists and managers communities, like, whether it's someone like Daddy Yankee, who I've known for 20, like, since the beginning of my career, or Balvin and his team, and Carol G and her, like all these big artists that I knew known from the beginning, and then I'm giving them respect and they're giving it back, which is great.
right. No, I love that, man. So Jesus, yo, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, man. Appreciate you, all the little nuggets and everything that you dropped for us, yo. Like, and I'm sure, like, even me, I'm just over here writing stuff down. It was
We
great.
haven't even covered all of it, but thank you so much. This was great.
No, man, but super inspiring, especially like you come up, right, like born and raised in New York, and then how you just from the beginning just say, you know what, like let me just find who can not hire me, like working an intern, and then from there, like just figuring it out, because like I'm sure at one point you were just like just trying stuff to keep going, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So thanks
Absolutely.
again, man, and then appreciate you, man, for real.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.